What's going on, you guys? This is Bridget Kelly, and you are locked into We Talk Weekly.
Therapist and an author, and has a book entitled The Sexual Miseducation of Black Men in America. It speaks about how the toxic lessons that many have learned about sex as Black boys and men have contributed to the dysfunction in relationships, families, and communities. The book explores ways to recondition our Black gentlemen to be better stewards of sexuality. Let's give a warm We Talk Weekly welcome to Adama Bracewell.
Yeah, my brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing, bro?
Oh man, my guy, man. First of all, man, let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about, man, how we connected, bro. Like when I tell you, school has always been a dynamic situation. First of all, why don't you tell everybody, because you're a friend of mine, so I don't want to be obvious, you know what I mean? So it's all good. But let's talk about kind of, your education and some of the work you've been doing there, and then what led you into being, pretty much a community advocate and a service worker and now author. Let's talk a little bit about that transition, that voyage, that travels that you have been from school all the way to now.
Okay, well, if we're going to start with education, of course, you probably don't even remember, but, I went to Temple University.
Yeah,
TU. Yeah, my freshman orientation, you was one of the brothers that was doing the tour. And so that's how far.
Man.
Yeah, so we talking about
that's crazy.
90-something.
Wow.
So you probably don't remember that, but I did my undergrad at Temple, where I got my degree in psychology there. After I graduated, got into the work field, started working in the mental health field, behavioral health field, working in it with children and families.
That's right.
Did that for a little while before I went back to Chestnut Hill College to get my graduate degree. So that's where I received my graduate degree in clinical psychology and with a concentration in marriage and family therapy. And right now I'm like one step away from gaining my licensure in the state of Pennsylvania. Yeah. So it's been a journey, just working in this field, seeing the things that's going on in the community, the things that's affecting our kids. Of course, working with children with all different type of diagnoses, ADHD, depression, adjustment disorders. So I've seen the gambit, and I've worked with all types of different mental health and behavioral diagnoses.
Yeah, so that's interesting. When we talk about kids, just real quick, what was your take? Because there was this big conversation, especially because that's kind of like my background in terms of behavioral health. But when we talk about, they call it the COVID slide, right? Kids who adjusting from COVID, that whole social emotional piece, and then going back into school. What was some of the, I guess, I want to say episodes, but is it anything that you observed? Some of your observations based on kind of like that whole COVID adjustment going back into school, especially as it relates to our young men?
Oh, definitely. It was hard for adults to go back to work after COVID. So you can imagine with kids staying out for 2 years and just them having to adjust back to that structure of sitting in the classroom, listening to the teacher. Those kids that already had some type of behavioral issues or hard time paying attention, it was 10 times as hard for them. So, it was a lot of kids getting suspended. There's a lot of kids showing different type of behaviors. I work currently in a crisis program, and the amount of referrals that we get from the crisis program from kids that was sent to crisis because of behavioral issues, it almost doubled after COVID than what it was before. because kids just had a hard time adjusting, and they still having a hard time adjusting. A lot of them are coming back with social anxiety. A lot of them experience a lot of bullying, internet bullying during that time, and then it continued when they got back to school. There was a lot of kids that didn't want to go back to school. So now the rise of homeschooling is on. So it impacted them in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the rise of internet bullying, right? Bullying, because I don't think a lot of people not only acknowledge it, but don't even know that it's happening, right? And because of this whole kind of digital, uprising, so to speak, you have a lot of the games now digital, and they're using like the discords, and they're talking, and they're being called names. And so what's your thought on how to manage this, especially for youth to manage, their not necessarily aggressions, right? Because I hate to put that in context as being aggressive, right? But how do we manage, that type of, a communication that's happening on like the digital consoles and the games and all of that? How do we do that, and how do we talk to our youth about it?
Yeah, it's, for one, let me say first, it's very difficult to manage because the internet, social media, the online learning is it's just a part of our community and society now. So that everyone's doing it. So in order to manage it, it really just takes parents, teachers to do a lot of, I should say, regulations.
Okay.
Making sure that you put some restrictions on some stuff. There's different parental restrictions that you can put on social media, things of that nature. You have to sit down and have a conversation with your kids as well and educate them. Because what I'm seeing a lot of with this whole social media and just the internet thing is that it's having an effect on their image, it's having an effect on their self-esteem. So it's up to us as parents and adults to give our children as much I should say compliments, as much uplifting as possible, because they're getting the negative a lot from the society, from community, from social media, just from comparing themselves from what they're seeing. So it's up to us to find like those qualities in them, to congratulate them, to reward them for. That's the only way I can see us combating them. We got to give them as much positive as negative that they're receiving out there in the community.
Interesting.
Adama, as a Black therapist, how important is representation to young Black men? I mean, a lot of times they're saying that, just get therapy. But a lot of times culturally, you can't speak to a young Black man from a white man's perspective, respectfully, in regards to, trying to, like you said, uplift or help with the healing process. Tell us about that.
Well, it's still such a stigma in our community for therapy. So if we're encouraging young Black men or young older men, I should say, to get therapy, we definitely need to make it as comfortable as possible. And we're usually comfortable with people that we can identify with, people that can understand some of the things that we've been through, or at least can relate to it. So as far as representation, it's needed. It's needed a lot. Black therapists we're needed because it is a rise in men going for therapy. I see it more and more in my practice. I see it in my day job. There's more men going for help, but there's not a lot of Black men therapists out there to serve them. So so I think we just relate better as brothers, and they can open up and talk to us a little bit better. So I think just that comfortability, being able to identify with the person that's sitting across from you, that helps a lot.
So what shift do you think is happening that's causing Black men to go out and seek therapy?
We're talking about it more. We're encouraging it more. The stigma is slowly dropping because the conversation is happening. I think we're moving away from like the traditional belief that if you go to see a therapist, you're crazy, or you're out of your mind, or something like that. And the things that we used to do aren't helping. So I think they're trying something new, and it's being encouraged. So.
Yeah, and I like that. I like how you said that. I think the conversation is happening more. You know, that whole thing is, you know, back then, go see a counselor. That meant it's crazy. Oh, you crazy or something? I ain't going to see that. Or it was the idea of pray it out, right? And I think that has changed a little bit. You know, that I'm appreciating, because I mean, everyone has to work on themselves, right? And so, kind of in that context, have you seen kind of a religious conversation based around therapy?
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing more churches actually include mental health services as a ministry in their church. The church I attend right now, we're developing a mental health ministry.
Oh, that's dope.
So there's a lot of churches that's changing the way they're looking at mental health, and it's no longer just pray about it. It's the devil or something like that. They know there's some spiritual issues, but then there's some very practical issues and they both have different solutions. So, things that are spiritual, we're gonna pray about it. But those things that are practical, if you're dealing with depression, if you're dealing with trauma, if you're dealing with some abandonment issues, there's some skills that person needs to learn even while we're praying. So you can do both at the same time.
What are some of the traumas that people come in and or that you have been noticing as it relates to Black men? What are some of the traumas? What are some of the issues that they find very important to them that they have been talking to you about?
It varies. But what I'm seeing the most is something that we call developmental trauma. Okay. And that's basically when a man grows up in an environment that's maybe so violent or so drug infested. There's so much negativity that's going on around them that they don't even realize that they're developing in trauma. So the behaviors that they develop, the defense mechanisms that we develop, it doesn't seem like it's odd until we step out of that environment and go somewhere else. And then you realize, I'm not functioning the way I'm supposed to function because everyone around me was doing this. It seemed normalized. So it's that developmental trauma that we grow up in, where if you grew up in the hood, a gunshot, if you probably look around, but you keep on doing what you're doing. In the other environment, if you hear gunshots, you got to look for safety. But if you grew up in an area where shooting and drugs and prostitution was so normal, it won't affect you. Right. Well, I shouldn't say it won't affect you. It does affect you, but you don't notice that it affects you because everyone has adapted to that abnormality. Yeah. So would you say that that's kind of like a coping mechanism, though? Is that actually bad to kind of say, okay, well, I'm already in these toxic, environments, and I know that this is happening. So if I don't cope in a certain type of way, right? If I don't, try my best to manage my own aggressions by way of saying that, hey, this is how it is, although that's not normal, right? I get it. But is it okay, or I won't say okay, but is it something there for people to say that this is the way that I cope before they do go, quote unquote, crazy, so to speak, if that makes sense? No, it makes perfect sense. And it is some strength in it. Yeah. It is some strength because, as a Black man living in certain environments, you do have to walk around with a defense. Yeah, you do have to kind of walk up with a wall up, or there's a good opportunity that you might become a victim. That's right. So in that environment, it works perfectly. And it works well. It works in your favor. But if you want to step out of that environment and you want to expand and grow and mature, those same defense mechanisms that you used in the hood is not going to work in the corporate world. It's not going to work on your job. It's not going to work if you're in school. We went to Temple together. I grew up in the hood, and I grew up with a wall up with some type of defense mechanism. So when I went to Temple, I walked around you know, I'm on edge.
I'm trying to tell you.
I'm on edge,
yeah, for sure.
not realizing that I'm in an environment where it's really all love.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, these people don't want no problem, but I came into that environment with that, and that stopped me from making a lot of friends.
Yeah.
That stopped me from networking. That stopped me from really progressing in that environment because I came with that mentality to a college campus.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was there for a while till I realized, you know, there's some good people here.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I'm not back in Jersey in the streets where if showing friendship is a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what happens. If you want to get out of that environment, then it's not a good defense mechanism.
You know, and you say something that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, 100%, because where I came from, it was like on the block, right? Mm-hmm. And just kind of like the mentality of, you know, feeling like it's cool to be there, right there. You know what I'm saying? Isn't normal. You know, you say something about you go to other, you know, you might go to another neighborhood or something that's outside of the environment that you're in, and the way that we respond. I mean, literally, and it's true story, North Carolina, really Southern home. I mean, you're talking about just most people. Shout out to North Kakalaki, right? But I mean, literally, we come here. Somebody say, "What's up?" We like, "What's up?" Like, "What's up?" Like, "We good? You good?" But literally, somebody was saying, "What's up?" Like, "Hey, what's up? What's up, partner? What's up? How you doing?" And I took that. Just the mentality that I had was already defense, right? And so, of course, looking back, you can say that's a trauma. You know, that's a trauma, and we kind of grew up in that. And I think it's great to start having these conversations because now we can look back and say, "Hey, yo, that's not normal." Like, you can take yourself out of that. There's no reason to be a certain type of way, which is also, I think, a great and look at me calling the kettle black, but it's also a great idea to get these young people to travel. I'm one, and I say that because I'm one that don't travel. I hate traveling, right? But I say that to say that, you know, going certain places, you get a different perspective, especially if you start young, because you realize everybody on a block, it's not necessarily the same when you go somewhere else, right? So I appreciate you mentioning that. I want to have a conversation real quick about, I just want to back up because we kind of spoke about the games, right? And, you know, we have our youth playing, you know, these games, and what's the one you always mention that
Fortnite and
Grand Theft Auto specifically. And when we talk about, you know, Grand Theft Auto and some of the things that people are believing that some of the youth are reenacting, right? When it comes to the streets of Philadelphia, so to speak, do you think, especially someone with your background, do you think a lot of those video games have some effect on the psyche of these youth that they will play out when it comes to like their own communities? Or do you think they're able to compartmentalize that and say, this is game, this is digital, and this is real life? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think it definitely has an effect. Just like anything else that we try to use for entertainment, like if it's music, people might say that's just entertainment, but that's not necessarily true. Music really can control the culture. Yeah. It creates a mood inside of you. It can make you happy. It can make you sad. And I think the same thing is happening with like video games. It definitely affects you mentally if that's something that you're indulging or that you're engaged in for hours at a time. It's hard to separate reality from fantasy. Sometimes that becomes your reality. So, you know, I have no scientific proof over that, but it is my theory that the lack of value that I see put on life these days, in correlation to the type of games that I know children play, I really think that there's a relation. And, you know, these video games, I think it impacts the way they think just as much as music impacted the way I thought back in the day listening to music.
I agree with that. Wow. Interesting. We talk a little bit about when you did your kind of like introduction, kind of like ADD, ADHD, and I was diagnosed with, I mean, clearly, you can see I'm animated, right? That's who I am, right? And I learned to embrace it. But what's the thoughts of the hyper kind of medicating of that type of behavior for our kids. Do you believe that medication is always the key? Or do you think like just therapy or kind of like role modeling could be part of their, behavioral, I guess, fix? Or I hate to say because they're not broken, but just kind of like that way to allow them to kind of reinforce what's good and to kind of remedy that, so to speak. Yeah.
I always think that medication should be the very last
That's
resort.
right. Yeah, for sure.
There's so many different behavioral modifications that we can try, different reward systems, different punishments, different programs that we can get our young boys involved in to help modify some of the things that they do, try to control their behaviors or become more attentive. There's so many things that we skip over and just jump straight to medication, just because a teacher doesn't want to deal with the behaviors. So we put on some medication, and also the pharmaceutical is big business as well.
There you go.
So that definitely plays another part. But especially for young kids, I see some kids that's as young as 7, 8 getting prescribed medication. So that really could have some long-term effects.
Yes.
So I say definitely try everything before you even start the conversation about medication.
That's a good segue to talking about your book.
Yeah, I was going to go there. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So go ahead.
No, because he has it on his desk, and I want him to show the people his book. So I want to go there, but I have another question before I go into that, because I want you to really talk a little bit more about just kind of like your transition and why you believe it's important to talk more to our black men and our black boys. What pushed you in that kind of direction? Yeah.
Kind of what we was talking about before, as far as how our community is falling apart. There's some things going right, but there's also a lot of things going wrong, like the violence and things of that nature. But I also believe a lot of the unhealthy sexual habits that we have learned and been conditioned to follow as black men also helps destroy our community. It helps to destroy families. It damages us. It damages our female counterparts, if not more, just as equal as the violence and the drugs that's going on. Because of that, I think there's a lot of single family or single parent households out there. There's a lot of kids dealing with depression, dealing with abandonment issues, because we've been conditioned to just have this casual, meaningless sex. And just go to the next one and try to conquer as many women as we can, and I believe that's a part of the major part of the damage that's being caused in our community and our families.
Now, I think that's an excellent transition. As Spark was about to mention, the sexual miseducation of black men in America. Pass me that book because I want people to actually have the opportunity to see this. But here you go. Right. Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about the book and what you're referencing as opposed to the sexual miseducation, right? Because I don't even in being transparent, I don't even remember in myself being educated about sex, right? And so when is the right time to do it? And that uncomfortable conversation that you have to have, so to speak, to acknowledge, sexual education. So that I'm uncomfortable kind of talking about it, right? And so when do you have that conversation? And let's talk about some of the things that you outline in here. Yep.
Yeah. What you just said, I think, is one of the issues when it comes to us as black men. We don't receive proper education about sex. I've interviewed or talked to over 100 guys writing this book. And my first question is always, what's the foundation of your sex education? No one says their parents. No one says a reliable or respectable man. The top things they say is pornography, music, their peers, sexual abuse in a lot of cases, the internet, watching TV, pornographic magazines. That's where we learn about sex as black men, for the most part.
Right.
Not all of us, but
for sure.
a great majority of us. We learn it from some very unreliable, unhealthy ways. And that miseducation that we receive around about sex, it affects the way that we act within our community. It affects the way we act in our relationships. It affects the way we trust, the way we treat women, and the way we treat our kids. So so what you said about not receiving the education or not remembering, a lot of us never received the proper education, but we learned from all these things that was around us in our community, and most of it was not good or healthy for us when it comes to properly managing our sexuality.
So how would you explain, or it's in a book, so I don't necessarily want you to give away some of the things in the book because I want them to get the book, right? But is there tips and I guess ways that you walk people through how to in terms of having that conversation, especially as a father to a son, right? It's easier. Kudos to the sisters. Sisters always had these conversations, right? Boy, you better not, and don't bring home no babies and all. I get that. The sisters are already on top of it, but the men, right? We're either kind of like, good stuff, good job, or we're like, he'll figure it out, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So what is it that we can do? Do you walk people through that in your book, especially to men, and how to have these conversations?
In the book, I definitely encourage men to have that conversation. And I think it needs to start early. I don't think we can wait.
What's early though?
It needs to start as early as the child can understand, and it has to be age appropriate, of course. So I have a son. My son is in the studio right now.
Shout out to him. Yeah, younger. Yeah.
When he was 3-4 years old, I started talking to him about his body parts. Started talking to him about what's a good touch or bad touch. Who you should talk to if someone touches you,
right.
And know and respect other people's boundaries. That's a part of sex education.
Yeah.
Just talking about your body and good touches. But as he matures, the conversation matures. He's 14 now. I can't wait till he's 14 and those hormones jump in, and he's starting to be attracted to girls for me to sit down and say, okay, let me tell you about girls. I think it needs to be a gradual conversation as they grow, develop, and mature. And it makes it a lot easier when they get that age. A lot of the times, like the guys that I interviewed, they said none of them had this conversation with their dads.
I didn't.
Yes,
well, my dad wasn't there, so I mean.
Then that's another issue. So it is up to us to step into the lives of a lot of young brothers that don't have their dads there to have these conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we don't have these conversations with our fathers. We don't have these conversations with our uncle. They do kind of like what you said. They congratulate us. They see you with a girl, you're hitting that or something like that. And we're encouraged to do that type of stuff.
For sure.
And that's how we are often taught how to value our manhood. We base our manhood on that, how many girls we're having sex with, how many women we can get, things of that nature. And those things are very fickle. Those things are very temporary if you base your manhood on the amount of women you sleep with or how well you perform in the bedroom.
Right.
So we definitely have to start teaching them some real solid ways of how to measure their manhood on honesty, integrity, good character, things of that nature, and not just how many girls you can get.
And real quick, because I know y'all got a question. How was, because you're saying that you had that conversation, and I want the ladies to have opportunity to ask, but how was it, what was the response like with mom, with you having that conversation at that age? Was it any, he's too young, or was it thanks for the, how was that energy with that? Because a lot of times, or oftentimes, that can play as a factor with men kind of engaging, right? Because the mom is there, and the mom might, feel a little, off-put with it or something like that. What was that energy like?
Well, the energy is fine because we're on the same page.
Okay, that's good.
And we, you have to communicate. And of course, we have to have children with women that are mature and understand. I know that's not always the case.
Yeah,
that's not always the case. But there's some things that we have to communicate to the mom to help her understand that he's going to face these things. He's going to deal with these things in life. So we need to have this conversation, or start to have the conversation now, and don't try to throw it all on him when he turns 15. It'll be too late by then.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what role does women play in this when it comes to the sexual miseducation of black men? Because now you have social media, and you have these young women out here that are like, they're getting the BBLs, and they want to be sexually appealing to a man.
Great question.
So how does that affect the man who's already miseducated,
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, it impacts it a lot. It impacts it a lot because there was a time where we was receiving two different type of educations about sex. There was a time traditionally that young girls was being taught to value themselves, to hold out, to what you have is precious. But the message has changed for young ladies these days, and they're getting the same level of miseducation that the boys are getting these days. So it impacts it, and it makes it even harder. It makes it even harder to deal with. So I can only imagine with what boys like my son age are going through. But that book is mainly focused on the boys, because somehow, some way, we still have to learn to be disciplined. We still have to learn how to control ourselves, despite what is going on around us, despite what's getting thrown at you. So I speak about that the most, like being disciplined. Focus on your goals. Focus on what you want to get into in life. So those distractions don't throw you off the track as much. But it's not easy.
Yeah, y'all answered it. So it was more so saying that you had mentioned about reconditioning black boys and young men on how to basically treat their bodies. So it's basically now to the point when these young men meet that individual of a young lady, because it's not, to what you said, Charles, it's a different time, basically, and mothers are younger, and they're not educating their daughters appropriately on the value of who they are, like what Sizzle said. So we are living in a time where it's generational. I mean, back in the day when they were breaking up households for a masculine energy to be there, it was Section 8. It was, housing. It was, if I see sneakers in or men's shoes, you can't live in, you know what I mean? So it was agendas that were already created to create this division. And now it's time for us to unite together, so that these books that help will now have the young man talking to the young lady, letting her know what her value is, because she's looking at him based on his value. So thank you definitely for sharing your talents and your wisdom with everyone, as far as, where we're heading in this miseducation of sexuality.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. I guess one of the last questions I have is, there's been this huge new conversation in terms of sexuality, right? And for those of us who kind of grew up in this, hyper masculine position, right? Which I hate the word toxic masculinity, right? I hate that, because anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but this hyper masculine kind of like position of, this is what a guy and a male is supposed to be. This is what a woman and a female is supposed to be. What's your take on kind of like this new kind of, evolution of sexuality, and having that conversation in context to your book, and the possible feelings that, some boys now feel that maybe they're not meant to be in the skin that they're in. Maybe they are having different feelings now. How do you then have that conversation in context to like the book and things that you've been teaching?
Like I was saying earlier, as far as the things that a lot of boys have learned, or the ways they have learned, and one of the ways have been sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And I work with kids, I work with boys, and that's dealing with sexual confusion and things of that nature. I'm not saying that every boy that's dealing with that has been abused,
Right.
but a great majority that I work with have. Right. And that's trauma.
Yeah.
That's trauma. So the way to help that is to help them work through that trauma, to help them process that trauma, help to identify their triggers, help them to see that they were victims, but they don't have to live as victims. Right. Because it brings a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And with their sexuality, a lot of them become the predator. They start to victimize others if they was victim. They start to copy those same behaviors. When it comes to the sexuality and the confusion, that's still a very hard conversation to have. But I'll leave it at that. Is a lot of times it has to do with trauma.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had one more comment on the book. You said, we will assist Black men with overcoming one of the biggest struggles, the temptation of casual and meaningless sex. This alone has stopped millions of us from living up to our full potential. So, they're now talking about marriage rates have declined. And this is all across the board for all races. But, we know historically or over time that so many things have happened that has caused the African Americans and Blacks, marriage rates to decline. Do you feel that educating them on sex will cause marriage rates for the Blacks in the Black community to increase?
Yeah, I believe so. Educating them, giving them proper education on sex, because if we give them the proper education, in my opinion, is find one woman, one good woman, value her, build a family with her, opposed to spread yourself thin among 100 different women. So I would hope the result of learning that discipline, learning how to control yourself, looking for that one good woman will increase marriages and improve families and things of that nature. And it'll cut down on the time that we waste chasing women and chasing sex in our 20s and 30s and in our teens. So that's my hope, is to help raise stronger Black families in the community.
And last question, what's your thoughts on Nick Cannon? I'm just saying.
You can take care of him.
Yeah, I don't think he's helping. I don't think he's helping the cause. He's not helping the cause.
There you go.
I was gonna say show it one more time.
There you go. The sexual miseducation of Black men in America, man. Listen, my brother, I appreciate you for coming to the show. I think I want to have you up here a little more, if you are feeling up to it. I think this conversation as it relates to Black men needs to happen more. I think oftentimes, and I won't say that it's a good thing or bad thing. I'm just saying the conversation surrounding women, mental health, their sexuality has happened a lot, right? And happens often. And it could be that they're just more comfortable to have these conversations, right? And that's that. Hey, good thing, bad thing, I don't know. It's just a thing, right? But when it comes to men, we don't necessarily have those type of groups to talk about not only sexuality, but sex, Black men and sex in a safe space that it feels healthy without feeling like we have to utilize our ego to show where we are as it relates to sex, if that makes sense, right? And so if you're willing, brother, I want you to start coming up. And one thing that we say on the show, once you come up to the show, you're a friend to the show, so you're always welcome, right? And so you're now family to the show. You're part of the We Talk Weekly family, so you're more than welcome to come up. But we'll have that conversation a little bit more. But before I let you go, I want you to tell everyone where they can get your book, how they can get your book, and how they can find you, locate you, and even to get some consulting from you and stuff, all that good old stuff. Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks for having me. It was a great conversation. I usually travel with a group of guys, some of the guys that's on the cover of the book.
That's
so if
what's
we
up.
come back up, I'll bring them with me.
Awesome.
You
Yeah.
can, my website is readyforrelationship.com. So that's the number 4, Ready for Relationship. And you can find the book there, or you can find the book on Amazon.com. You can find me on social media under the same thing, Ready for Relationship on Instagram, or my name, A.B Bracewell.
Fantastic. A.B Bracewell, my guy, man. We go back Temple University. We go back all the way back like Boston Baked Beans and Mike and Ike's, man. Yeah, we got some, wheels up under us. Can you pull that book up one more time? I want people to see that again. I don't know if you can actually see, but it's some beautiful black faces on that book. There it goes. Some men, and I like the idea to talk about our brothers in positive lights, because oftentimes we don't get that. And that frustrates me, even in the visual. See, my background is in, STEM, right? Part of that is underscoring media literacy. And if you look at pretty much every show that's out there, it's always a negative storyline behind what black men are doing to women. I don't get it. There's a lot of, or you'll see this whole diverse in culture where it's like not a healthy black man, black woman. It's always has to be like a black man, white woman, a white woman, black man. I don't know, right? But I'm talking about the healthy family. I want to see more of that. And so I get ticked off when I see all these movies. I don't want to see another movie with a man beating up a woman. I just don't want to see it, right? But healthy black men, healthy families, and we definitely have to have this conversation. And so I appreciate you coming to the show, my brother.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
What's going on, you guys? This is Bridget Kelly, and you are locked into We Talk Weekly.